Maria stood on the worn balcony of her modest apartment, clutching her chipped mug of tea as the city hummed below. The skyline glittered, a stark contrast to the simplicity of her life, a life that had changed overnight yet felt achingly familiar. The wooden box on her desk held Mr. Benson's letter, its words etched into her soul: "Kindness is the only true wealth." 3 weeks had passed since the world learned she'd inherited his empire of 9 private banks, a fortune built in shadows and now hers to wield. Headlines screamed her name: the nurse who became a billionaire, the caregiver who conquered, but Maria wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing purpose, and the weight of that pursuit was heavier than she'd ever imagined. The world was watching, and not all eyes were kind. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, reporters begging for interviews, old acquaintances pleading for favors, and strangers claiming kinship with Mr. Benson. Maria, once invisible in her scrubs, was now a beacon, and a target. She sipped her tea, grounding herself in the familiar ritual, and wondered how a girl from nowhere could navigate a world that demanded so much. Her first test came in the form of Victor Crane, a businessman whose charm was as polished as his tailored suit. He strode into her temporary office, a small, cluttered room above the first Benson clinic she'd funded, his eyes scanning the space with thinly veiled disdain. "Maria," he said, settling into a chair that creaked under his confidence, "you've inherited an empire, but let's be honest, you're a nurse, not a financier. This is a complex world, cutthroat. My consortium can manage these banks, maximize their potential. You can focus on your charities." His smile was a blade, slicing through her resolve. Maria's fingers tightened around her pen. She thought of Mr. Benson's books, the heavy tomes on finance and law she'd found on his shelf. She'd spent nights deciphering them, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, learning terms like leverage and equity that felt like a foreign language. She wasn't an expert, but she wasn't helpless. "Mr. Crane," she said, her voice steady, "these banks were built to serve people, not exploit them. If your consortium wants to partner, it'll be to uplift communities, not to line pockets. If that's not your goal, the door's open." Crane's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. He stood, adjusted his tie, and left without a word. Maria exhaled, her heart racing. She'd held her ground, but she knew this was only the beginning. The world of high finance was a labyrinth, and she was a novice with everything to prove. Samuel, her husband, was her anchor. Every evening, he returned from the mechanic shop, his hands smudged with oil, his smile warm with love. He'd listen as she poured out her fears, investors circling like vultures, media twisting her story, the weight of a legacy she hadn't asked for. "You're smarter than they think," he'd say, kissing her forehead. "And you've got something they don't, heart." His belief in her was a lifeline, pulling her through the storm. Maria threw herself into understanding the empire she'd inherited. She met with the managers of the 9 banks, each a testament to Mr. Benson's quiet genius. The Sahara Trust in Morocco funded irrigation for desert farmers, the Thames Vault in London supported small businesses in struggling neighborhoods, the Nile Anchor in Egypt offered microloans to women entrepreneurs. Each bank was a thread in a tapestry of compassion, woven by a man who'd hidden his light from the world. Maria vowed to preserve that vision and expand it, to make the banks a force for good in a world that often forgot how. Her first major move was launching the Benson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to healthcare and education in underserved communities. She poured millions into building clinics, training nurses, and funding scholarships. She hired caregivers like herself, people who'd been invisible, overworked, underpaid, and gave them salaries that reflected their worth. At the opening of the first Benson clinic, a young nurse named Lila approached her, tears in her eyes. "I was you," Lila said, her voice trembling. "Double shifts, no money, no hope. Now I have a job, a purpose. You've changed everything." Maria hugged her tightly, feeling the echo of her own struggles. "You're why I'm doing this," she said. "We're not shadows anymore. The moment was a spark, igniting her resolve to keep pushing forward. But the world wasn't as kind as Lila's gratitude. The more Maria gave, the more it demanded. Lawsuits flooded in from so-called relatives of Mr. Benson, none of whom had visited him in his final days. They came with lawyers and fabricated stories, claiming shares of an estate they'd never cared about. Maria sat through depositions, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken. Attorney Langston, her steadfast ally, dismantled each claim with precision, uncovering forged documents and lies. The lawsuits crumbled, but they left Maria wary. Trust was a fragile thing, and the world was quick to break it. The media was another battleground. At first, they'd celebrated her, a rags-to-riches fairy tale, a beacon of hope. But soon, the tone shifted. Gossip blogs questioned her motives. "Is Maria Donald too good to be true?" one headline sneered. Others attacked her marriage, calling Samuel a gold digger who'd latched onto her wealth. The accusations cut deep, especially for Samuel, who'd been her rock through every trial. "I hate that they're dragging you through this," he told her one night, his voice tight with anger. "You don't deserve it." "Neither do you," Maria replied, taking his hand. "But we're stronger than their words." She meant it, but the scrutiny was relentless. She began to doubt herself, wondering if she was doing enough, if she was worthy of Mr. Benson's trust. The pressure to be perfect was a weight she couldn't shake, and for the first time, her hope flickered. Then, one evening, a package arrived at her office. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. A note was tucked inside, written in Mr. Benson's shaky handwriting. "Maria, when the world feels heavy, read this. It's my story, not the one they'll tell you. Keep going." Her hands trembled as she opened the journal, her breath catching at the sight of his familiar script. The journal was a window into Mr. Benson's life, a tapestry of triumphs and regrets. He'd grown up in a village so poor that hope was a luxury. At 16, he'd left with a suitcase and a dream, working as a dockhand, a clerk, a street vendor. He taught himself finance from borrowed books, building his first bank, the Sahara Trust, in a war-torn corner of Morocco. Over decades, he created 8 more, each a quiet rebellion against a world that valued profit over people. But the journal wasn't just about success. It was about his failures, a marriage that crumbled, a daughter he never knew, friendships lost to ambition. "I built walls to protect myself," he wrote, "but they kept out the light." Maria read late into the night, tears streaming down her face. She saw herself in his words, the hunger, the doubt, the quiet hope that refused to die. The final entry was dated the day before he hired her. "I'm tired," he wrote. "The world takes more than it gives. But today, I met a girl who reminds me of who I was before the walls. She's kind, not for reward, but because it's who she is. If I have one last thing to do, it's to give her the chance I never had, to build a legacy that matters." The journal was a lifeline. Maria realized Mr. Benson hadn't chosen her because she was perfect, but because she was human. She didn't need to be flawless, she just needed to keep going. With renewed determination, she dove back into her work. She expanded the Benson Foundation, opening schools in rural villages and funding clean water projects in drought-stricken regions. She partnered with local leaders, ensuring every initiative respected the communities it served. She launched a mentorship program for young women, teaching them finance, leadership, and the power of kindness. "You don't need money to change the world," she told them. "You need heart." But the challenges never stopped. A scandal erupted when Victor Crane, now a bitter rival, accused the Nile anchor of mismanaging funds. The claims were false, a calculated smear, but the headlines were brutal. "Billionaire nurse's empire in trouble," one read. Maria faced the press, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I welcome any investigation," she said. "Our books are open because our mission is clear, to help people, not to hide. The audits proved her right, exposing Crane's bank as the one with questionable practices. His reputation crumbled, but Maria didn't gloat. She opened another clinic, funded another school, and moved on. Her relationship with Samuel deepened through the chaos. He wasn't just her support, he was her partner in every sense. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her strength. When she succeeded, he cheered the loudest. They began to dream of a family, but Maria worried about raising a child in a world so quick to judge. Samuel, ever steady, took her hands and said, "Our kid will have you as a mom. That's more than enough." His faith in her was a light that never dimmed, and it gave her courage to face the unknown. One afternoon, Maria received an unexpected visitor, Richard, her former landlord, who'd once mocked her for caring for Mr. Benson. He stood at her office door, clutching a worn cap, his face lined with regret. "Maria," he said, his voice barely audible, "I know I don't deserve to be here. I was cruel, and I was wrong. You're doing things I could never dream of. I'm sorry." Maria looked at him, remembering the nights she'd cried because of his words. She could have turned him away, let him drown in his shame. But that wasn't who she was. "Thank you, Richard," she said softly. "I forgive you. And if you ever need help, not money, but a chance to do better, I'm here." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and left without asking for anything. It was a small moment, but it reminded Maria why she kept going. Kindness wasn't about grand gestures, it was about seeing people, even when they'd hurt you. Years passed, and Maria's impact grew. The Benson Foundation became a global force, building hospitals in war zones, schools in slums, and hope in places the world had forgotten. Maria and Samuel stayed in their modest home, raising their daughter, Lily, who had her mother's eyes and her father's quiet strength. Lily grew up helping at the clinics, handing out books at schools, and learning that wealth wasn't about money, but about what you gave away. One evening, as Maria tucked her into bed, Lily asked, "Mom, why do you help so many people?" Maria smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Because a long time ago, I helped a man who had nothing left to give. And he showed me that kindness is the greatest gift you can share. It's like a seed, it grows, even when you don't see it." The next morning, Maria received a package from Attorney Langston, who'd retired but still sent occasional notes. Inside was a photograph of Mr. Benson, young and smiling, standing outside his first bank in Morocco. A note was attached, "He'd be proud of you, Maria. You've done more than he ever dreamed." She framed the photo and hung it beside the wooden box that held his letter and journal. They were her anchors, reminders not of wealth, but of purpose. Maria's story spread far beyond her town. Books were written about her. Documentaries were made. But she never sought the spotlight. When asked to speak, she always returned to the same message: kindness doesn't need a reason. It doesn't need a reward. It's enough to know you've made someone's day a little brighter. Her words inspired millions, from caregivers to CEOs, to look at the world differently. One day, a young man approached her at a clinic opening. He was a nurse, fresh out of school, his scrubs crisp with hope. "I heard your story," he said shyly. "It's why I chose this path. I want to be like you." Maria smiled, her heart full. "You don't need to be like me," she said. "Just be kind. That's enough." But Maria's journey wasn't without loss. The world of finance was a labyrinth of greed, and not all her battles ended in victory. The Nile anchor faced a crisis when a corrupt local official siphoned funds meant for microloans. Maria flew to Egypt, meeting with community leaders and auditors to rebuild trust. It took months, and the stress etched lines into her face, but she saved the bank and ensured every borrower was repaid. "We don't give up on people," she told her team. "That's not who we are." She also faced personal betrayals. Her childhood friend, Emma, resurfaced, asking for a job. Maria offered her one, believing in second chances. But Emma betrayed her, leaking internal documents to a tabloid for a quick payout. The betrayal cut deep, but Maria didn't retaliate. She let Emma go, quietly, and moved on. Some people take time to learn, she told Samuel. I hope she finds her way. Maria never lost sight of the caregivers who inspired her. She created the Caregiver Alliance, a global network advocating for better pay, benefits, and recognition for those who worked in the shadows. At its first conference, she stood before thousands, her voice steady but emotional. Caregivers are the heartbeat of humanity, she said. You hold hands, wipe tears, and carry hope when no one else does. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And I will fight for you, always. The conference was a turning point. Governments took notice, passing laws to protect caregivers. Hospitals improved working conditions. Maria's name became synonymous with change, but she never let it go to her head. She still wore her old scrubs when visiting clinics, still made her own tea, still walked barefoot in her home before the world knocked. One evening, as Maria sat with Samuel on their porch, watching Lily play in the yard, a familiar figure approached. It was the silent driver who'd once delivered Mr. Benson's envelopes. He was older now, his hair gray, but his posture was dignified. He handed her a sealed envelope, bowed slightly, and left. Inside was another letter from Mr. Benson, written years ago but only now delivered. Maria, it read, if you're reading this, you've carried my legacy further than I could have hoped. I spent my life hiding, thinking power was safety. You've shown the world that power is giving. Keep shining, my dear. You've made an old man's life mean something. Maria folded the letter, tears streaming down her face. She placed it in the wooden box, beside the others, and felt a peace she hadn't known she needed. The next day, she announced the Benson Global Scholarship, a fund for caregivers to pursue education, from nursing to finance to anything they dreamed of. This is for you, she told a crowd of nurses, her voice breaking. Because you deserve the world. But the world wasn't done testing her. A global economic downturn hit, threatening the stability of her banks. Investors panicked, urging her to cut funding for her foundation to protect profits. Maria refused. We don't abandon people when times are tough, she said. Instead, she restructured the banks, redirecting profits to stabilize communities hardest hit by the crisis. She worked with economists and community leaders, creating programs to support small businesses and families. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The banks emerged stronger, and Maria's reputation as a leader grew. She also faced personal challenges. Lily, now a teenager, struggled with the public scrutiny of her mother. Why do people hate you for helping? She asked one night, her voice thick with frustration. Maria hugged her tightly. They don't hate me, she said. They're just scared of what they don't understand. Keep being kind, Lily. That's how we change their minds. Lily nodded, and Maria saw her daughter's strength, a reflection of her own. One day, Maria received an invitation to speak at the United Nations. She stood before world leaders, her scrubs replaced by a simple dress, but her heart unchanged. Kindness isn't weakness, she said. It's the courage to see someone's pain and act, even when the world tells you it's pointless. I was a nurse with nothing, but one act of kindness changed my life, and millions of others. Imagine what we could do if we all chose kindness. The speech went viral, sparking a global movement. People shared stories of small acts of kindness, a neighbor helping with groceries, a stranger paying for a meal. The hashtag Benson Legacy trended, with millions pledging to do one kind act a day. Maria watched it unfold, stunned. I didn't expect this, she told Samuel, tears in her eyes. You started it, he said, smiling. You showed them how. On the 10th anniversary of Mr. Benson's passing, Maria stood at his grave, a simple stone in a quiet cemetery. She placed a daisy on it, remembering how he'd said they reminded him of home. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saw me when no one else did. I hope I've made you proud." As she walked away, the laughter of children from a nearby school, one she'd built, carried on the wind. It was the sound of hope, of lives changed, of a legacy that would outlive her. Maria's story wasn't over. It was a living thing, growing with every clinic, every school, every life she touched. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: kindness had opened a door she never expected, and she would spend her life holding it open for others. And somewhere, Mr. Benson was smiling.